All right, hello. This is of course an automation guide on how to make a realistic 1940s car. This is a video a long time in the making, actually. I got this idea around a year ago, November 2022, and I was getting ready, doing all the research and everything, and then the devs announced that they had a really big update, the Ellisbury update, and I had to wait. And it finally came out about 10 months later or so. So I just had to get used to the update, and there's a patch, so I'd say I could finally make this guide. Now I'm here to finally make this guide, and I'm going to start with the 1940s American car. Now you'll probably see this. Let's see here. Decade notes. Yeah, the body style. Gotta unlock the thing. Body style, probably something like the Bumerica, or for regular 110. Yeah, probably these two, because full size cars were the cars that were being built. Actually, there were some concept cars or some concepts that were compact, but they really didn't make it to full production. But there were some compacts. There wasn't many. There's like 2, maybe. This would be good for a compact if you're making a compact. But if you're not, probably stick to these. I'd say make the 121-inch wheelbase. Probably something like... Yeah, just something long wheelbase for like a Buick, Cadillac, Packard, Chrysler, Dodge... Lincoln, Mercury, all the premium cars, the 121-inch wheelbase. And 110 is like the base models, like Nash, I think, DeSoto, Plymouth, Ford, Chevy, Pontiac, stuff like that. So, yeah. Panel, steel. Get used to it. Aluminum, but aluminum wasn't really used, but... Yeah, woodies were a thing on Suburbans and station wagons. See, that's a very period exclusive thing. I think into the 50s as well, because steel was heavy and a little expensive post-war. So to combat that, just make it out of wood. And of course you can't do that. So just make it out of aluminum if you want to make it wood. Ladder, get used to that as well. Space frame, no. Steel, you're going to have to use steel for a while because very old cars, you touch them and they start to rust. Galvanized steel is used for like utility stuff, like vans and trucks. Front longitudinal, only thing. Front suspension is a funky one because realistically there was a whole bunch of different front suspensions. There was solid axle coil actually used, but there was also like semi-dependent stuff that was like, does my note say that? Front suspension was weird because there was stuff like single wishbone, semi-independent coils and stuff. So yeah. Leaves were used too, so it's like super cheap, used leaf. If you're going for like coils, actual coils up front, or semi-independents, use coils. And then double wishbones were used. Cadillac had, and Lincoln, probably Chrysler or something, they had double wishbones. Use that if you're going upmost luxury. And in rear suspension, solid axle leaf only, because the only suspension that was used for the rear suspension for such a long time was leaf. It was actually used up until like the 80s. Chrysler was like the last one to use solid leafs in the 80s. There's a suspension. I completely forgot what the suspension system was called. But there is one that has leaves in the rear and like an independent in the front. And that's why leaf is used. No coils, no independent front and rears. No, none of that. And let's see here. Engine types. All sorts of engine types are actually used. Willys was the only one with an I-4 post-World War II, but were common pre-World War II. That is true. They were kind of, well, in the 30s, I think, they were actually, inline Fords are actually really being replaced. And like I said, Willys was genuinely the only one with the Go Devil. i4 that's used in the my cat in the Jeep Willys. I'm so sorry, my cat distracted me. Inline 6, that was the de facto 6-cylinder. Yeah, Tucker did make a Boxer 6 though. 5.4 liter, 334 cubic inch Boxer 6. The Tucker is such a unique car. Cause it, oh yeah. V8 or i8s. Inline 8s were actually used a lot more, but V8s were starting to be a thing, starting the 50s, because Oldsmobile was the first one to make an overhead valve V8, was the Rocket Super 88. And you could go a whole thing about that, but I ain't gonna. V12 was a Zephyr Lincoln. Yeah, that's right. That was like the one Lincoln. I don't. How big was that? It was like 4.8 liter, and 20s, 30s cars used a lot of them, and then they just stopped. And then V16, like I said, experimental airplane or tank, because that's another whole thing. V16s, planes or tanks. Of course, all material you got is cast iron. Heads and valves. In the 40s, they didn't use push rods, they used flatheads, L heads, and whatever. No, not L heads, something like that. Flatheads was the one thing that they used. I don't think automation's ever gonna add them in though, because they were very quickly replaced by push rods, overhead valves in the 40s and 50s. So we're never gonna get that. Probably. There were engines that did use an overhead valve, like the Buick Fireball Inline 8. That's the overhead valve. And I had things, displacement 2 to 2.5 liter inline 4, 222 cubic inch, 122, 53 cubic inch. Inline 6, 183, 244 cubic inches. V8s, 4 to 5.3 liters. That was a Cadillac V8. So it's like, they really didn't go over 300 cubic inches even, but the flatheads were large and they made a small amount of power, but this one's small, but it still made a lot of horsepower, because this is 79 net horsepower is around 100 gross horsepower, and that's like what a 230, 300 or something cubic inch inline 8 made. Inline 6, they didn't make a lot, but yeah. Flatheads were undersquare, but newer overhead valves were oversquare. That is right. They were very undersquare for flatheads, but they were becoming oversquare like this, like beginning with a 0.2 inch increase. Because they're just basically smoother, more power delivery, etc. That's why you'd want that instead of a flathead. Well, cast iron, that's the only thing you get. The one thing I found out that you kind of really have to use a cast iron heavy crank to get the horsepower for like any inline 6 V8. Con rods were just standard cast. If you use a light, it's like, oh yeah, it'll be good. No, because it doesn't handle the power. You have to use standard cast, and of course, cast heavy, it doesn't handle the RPMs. Well, it's just iron heavy cast. And if you don't have a power reliability threshold and everything like that, your engine just looks like this. That's fine. 40s engines were very unreliable. Like, very unreliable. Because, couldn't tell you exactly why, but these cars broke down a lot. So they basically, they broke down a lot. That's all I can say. Compression, just keep it kind of low, high, like a timing map. That's what I like to do. The highest timing map I like to do is there, so I can get a high compression, high fuel efficiency, etc. Because overhead valves did get a lot of compression. Cam profile, springs, listers, RPM limit, as much as you can get. Because these things made no horsepower. It is a 208 cubic inch. That's like a 3.1 liter or so inline 6, and it's making 79 horsepower, so just make as much as you can. This is a fun part. It's my cat again. Any inline six got a single barrel carburetor, no matter how big, how small, what decade it is. Inline sixes, single barrel carburetor, one single barrel, no matter what. Do you get any flow? No, because we can go here. You can see even a carb size of 73. It doesn't get any flow because inline sixes were sort of used for economy, so you don't need fuel going through it compared to a V8. Intake manifolds, I liked. I'd say just don't use performance, because in the 40s they didn't have muscle cars. There was no muscle car era here yet. So I'd just say compact, standard, low, or mid, just depending on what horsepower you want. The exhaust, compact cast was actually pretty commonly used on an inline 6 or a V8. Cast low, yeah, that is used, but that's sort of performance. This engine's used in the 50s as well, so you're going to see that. Catalytic converter, none of that. No resonator or first mufflers, only second mufflers, because resonators were not first mufflers were not a thing until like the 1960s. Because if you listen to a lot of these old cars on YouTube and stuff, they're a little louder and they have like a rumble to them. That's because no resonator. It's something like that. You could add one, but if it's completely stock, it's just got the one muffler on there. And of course, we can go to a V8 I made. Where is it at? Right here. We want an example for a V8 I made. It's the same thing around here. It's actually 48. This is actually 1 year before the Oldsmobile V8 was made. 1 year. I should probably make it like 49 or 50 because of that, but wish I could make it in line 8, but no, not yet. They said they might in the future. But need to up this compression, actually. I just upped it to there for now. Fuel system, of course, a 2-barrel, no matter. And that's another thing. If it's an inline, it gets single barrel. If it's a V-banked, it gets 2-barrel. Because it's just also another reason is like 1 barrel per bank in this time period. And also if you notice the ignition timing, it's all the way down there because octane gas was not up to 87, 86 yet. It was a very low octane because post-war, basically, or they just didn't have a high octane. School baffled, yeah. This is just for like a standard engine as well. This isn't a V8 powerhouse, 105 horsepower. That's honestly still a powerhouse back then, even for a net, but still, yeah. Oh, we'll switch it back to this. Yeah, you see I got the 50s. That's for another video. And then, of course, here to the drivetrain, which I liked. This is actually a little setup I've got. This is a 3-speed with overdrive. Let me actually make just a standard 3-speed. Because a 3-speed would be kind of like this. A 4-speed would have been like how I had it set up, or there wasn't really a 4-speed. It was a 3-speed with an overdrive. It wasn't really 4 speeds. The difference between a 4th speed and overdrive is that a 4th speed could use as actual gear. An overdrive had to have, shifted it into the overdrive, and then you just start like that. So, yeah. Something like that for a 3-speed. Because that was basically the only gears. There was no 2 speeds. There was 3 or 4-speed manuals. There were automatics, like, it's in my notes here. I forgot the names of them. The GM Hydromatic and the Chrysler Fluid Drive. Yeah, the Hydromatic was a genuine automatic, and the Chrysler Fluid Drive was like a semi-automatic. And yeah, automatics were things that were worse than slushbacks, because torque converters weren't torque converters. It was something like that. I wish I could I'm drawing up a blank, but it was basically something like that. They weren't torque converters, but they were. Let's see here. Take a look at my notes if you want to. Yeah, final drive 3.7 to 4.4 because of that 0 to 60, and of course the spacing kind of keep it like that because 0 to 60 is 22 seconds out of a car like this because it doesn't get good horsepower. It's not going to get a good 0 to 60, so that's fine. Of course, free-wheel drive only, four-wheel drives for Jeeps, manual lockers for Jeeps as well. There's a little guide for tire sizes actually back then, instead of just, it's like compact tire sizes is 152, 100C15. Default would be like 165, 100C15, 180, 100C16, 208, 90C15s, Halos. Of course, defaults bigger. This would be for like a V8, V12, the 180s, and of course the Halo cars. Halo cars are first to basically Cadillacs and Lincolns and whatnot, like the best of the best cars, by the way. 90C15. Yeah, there is 90 sidewalls or 100 sidewalls and 15-inch and 16-inch rims. And automation can't be 100% precise. Yeah, they're going to be a little wonky, but just do best you can. Brakes vary from 10 to 11 inches on 15-inch rims and 11 to 12 inches on 16-inch rims. Because, as you can see here, I have it all the way up, and it's just barely meeting that. Same there. I could go up with the brake pad type. You could if you want to. But, reminder, in the 40s, they had very manual braking. They had a brake booster, and that's about it. They didn't have much else. They were brakes. You had brakes. There were drums. Aerodynamics, they didn't really care about aerodynamics. Who cares there? Interior, this is a little important because they had benches, seats, front and rear. If you ever seen the interior of like an old 40s car, it was just a straight bench seat, like no seat belts. It just looked like a couch because they were couches. Very suede, leather, etc. couches. And entertainment, none, because radios were not standard until like sometime in the mid 60s. They were optional though. You can get an optional radio just about on like any car you can, like a DeSoto, Plymouth, lower model end. They can get radios, but they were just optional. And of course, the interior just kind of go with what you want, except race or sport, because like I said, I know muscle cars and whatnot. Or circulating ball. Yeah, do not use rack and pinions. Those weren't used a lot on ladder frames, especially back then, so it's just for circulating ball. So just use that. Safety, make sure you have standard 40s, because there was windshield safety glass. Because that was basically very new technology back then, and that was very nice. And so they used that. Make sure just to have standard 40s, not advanced 40s, because suspension, yeah. Springs. Now with this setup, this is actually messed up. I forgot to tune that, but this setup, you actually keep it between 1.1 to 1.5 and dampers from 2.2 to 0.3 because that is a very spongy suspension system. Now, of course, it's spongy suspension system because luxury, and it's the 40s. Roads have not been developed well, and there's no highway system yet. So you're going to probably drive off-road. So you're going to want an off-road suspension system. And sway bars, none. Sway bars have actually not really been invented yet. There's stabilizers. GM did have some form of front stabilizers on front independent and semi-independent. Yes, they did, but like I still wouldn't use them because just if you're gonna have roll angle, that's fine. Who cares? And of course, ride height as low as you can go because it helps with that roll angle. And that's about it. Well, no, we got trim body. We actually got features, styling. all of these could actually be used, I'd say, except the Ute and maybe the vans, because there were dedicated vans back then. And of course, there was a pickup. That's not the Ute. That's a real thing, but like this Ute, I think is a real thing, but it's like an Australian Holden thing, so it's not. And for styling, well, I really can't give you many tips other than just kind of look at cars in the period and look in the area. They had just these big single headlights. These are turn signals technically. They are, but they're not wraparounds. And they didn't have any wraparound lights either. These were actually pretty big style. Like these types of door handles are pretty big style. Some cars had split windows in the front and rear. I really like that, so I put that on my car. So there was no regulation on putting mirrors on both sides of the car. So a lot of the times you could still even find like cars in the 60s with one mirror. They didn't have that in thing. Brake lights, of course you have brake lights and headlights, know where you're going. Headlights know where you're going in the dark. Brake lights know, let people know you're going. And no turn signals either. No reverse lights. No turn signals or reverse lights until the 60s. A lot of the safety stuff came until the 60s. I can't wait to make that video. There's going to be so much about that. And I'm pretty sure that covers everything. Yeah. And that's pretty much how to make a realistic car. If you want an actual coherent guide, I recommend just looking at this. I'll probably upload it onto the description. So instead of hearing me ramble, you can just look at this. So yeah. Because I did miss this. 79 octane regular, 85 octane premium, Intel 55. So yeah. If you want that, there you go. And that is a video I was made that I wanted to make forever, and I have finally made it. Thank you.